So RWBY Volume 5 comes out soon, and I figured I'd do a review of Volume 4 as preparation for that. So, yeah, spoiler warning or whatever, if you care about that sort of thing. The first episode starts in Hell, which is apparently filled with grim and sewage, and we see at the Legion of Doom, Mercury, whose eyebrow game is on max, and Emerald, looking horrified for some reason, even though we can assume that they've been in Hell a while now. But whatever. Yeah, we see Mustache Guy and Chuckles over here banter a bit with Cinder about how she's failed miserably, but then Salem comes in gliding along the floor because walking is for losers. She then shows some favoritism by covering for Cinder's fuck-ups by highlighting her doing close enough to the bare minimum of what they were trying to accomplish to be passable. This makes me wonder, why does she seem to have this kind of favoritism, because last time I checked, most evil masterminds say personal attachments are the first thing to get rid of when you sign up to be an evil mastermind, but whatever, I guess Salem is a big fan of participation awards. Gotta keep lackey morale up somehow, I guess. But anyway, after going over their evil itinerary, she decides to adjourn the meeting by promoting Chuckles to be villain of the volume. Cut to a random kid we've never seen before doing farm things because damn it, they spent good money on this new animation program and they're going to make sure the audience appreciates it. Damn it. Then, just to emphasize the pointlessness of spending so long watching Farm Kid, we cut to Ren and Nora arguing about what their adventuring party should be called, as well as gaining the power to summon letters in the air. Okay. Nora arguing for Junior because she's realized that Jean has more claim to the main character status at this point than RWBY does, but Ren says it's too late to rename the show and starts lecturing about color theory. However, his lecture is cut short when RWBY comes crashing in having encountered a wild Regirock. Jean, Ren, and Nora each get a token we still exist scene, and RWBY demonstrates her lack of knowledge on type effectiveness by trying to use electricity on rock. Jean does some slapstick, talks about DBZ Abridged, and comes up with the brilliant idea of their team using teamwork to fight this thing. Now, this action scene isn't bad, but it's definitely not the best the show has done, not helped by the interruptions of Jean getting pummeled with rocks and Ren's confounding new powers of flight. Honestly, the most interesting idea to come out of this fight was the introduction of the idea that new and weirder types of Grimm exist, as opposed to the usual regular animals with an explosion of hardcore edginess thrown on them. But anyway, Team Junior gets kudos from some townsfolk. We see Jean has a rabbit on his shirt and gets a snazzy new outfit to go with everyone else's as they walk off into the sunset, and Ren says this:
Team Junior!
Still not a color.
Completely ignoring the fact that RWBY isn't a color either. We get a brief moment of Weiss brooding thrown in there so we can be introduced to her butler and reminded that she does have a father. Not sure why this scene needed to be put in here. In fact, it almost seems superfluous given that the next episode focuses on her, but whatever. Speaking of the next episode, it starts with Weiss walking through absurdly massive eyesore of a home. Weiss's douchey brother Wheaties, or whatever his name is, tells us everything we were told in the last scene, as well as some more background as to how fucked up a home life they actually have, thus proving that they wasted 15 precious seconds of screen time and my life. But whatever, it keeps the existential crisis at bay, I guess. But anyway, we cut back to Team Junior, and yes, I will keep calling them that, but more specifically RWBY's nightmare about her dead friend, which unlike that Weiss scene from episode 1, didn't waste seconds of time, and kept me from thinking about the universe waiting to kill us all. Then we see them walking, get used to hearing that, and we find out that RWBY doesn't know how to read a map, followed by some pretty good banter between them and a reveal of a destroyed town, and a pretty good scene with a dying huntsman, some good foreshadowing, and just a lot of good things. If only this quality could stay throughout the whole volume. We go back to Weiss walking out on an argument between Ironwood, who has decided to become the broest motherfucker ever in this volume, and her father, who in addition to having a truly mighty moustache, is expectedly a huge dick. They discuss Ironwood's plan to do something that Jocks hates, and Ironwood's all like, I am the council, but before they can finish, they notice Weiss there, and Ironbro tells Weiss it's cool to stay in school, particularly his, then pieces out. Jocks reinforces his dickishness to Weiss, who's already on the Ironbro fan train, and we get to set up for an apparent charity thing for Beacon and that Weiss can sing, because they need more songs for the soundtrack. Then she talks to Alfred, and we get another really good exchange between characters. Everything in this sequence is all really good, and dare I say, well written. Ironbro and Jocks' argument, the way we see the two of them interacting with Weiss, and how she interacts with Klein is all really good character stuff, and gives us a lot more insight to the kind of childhood Weiss had, and why she and her sister were so eager to get out of there. But enough about that, we get to see another RWBY nightmare about her PTSD, and we see that Jean is also working through his grief with an old recording of Pyrrha instructing him in battle. This was yet another really good scene displaying that these two are still haunted by the loss of their close friend, and that they are each trying to find their own ways of getting through it. And the fact that the focus is more on Jean in this scene as opposed to RWBY actually makes sense, as he had spent more time with Pyrrha as her teammate, as well as knowing that she had a thing for him and he had just been too dense to realize it. Overall, this was a very well-made episode. In fact, it was so well done that it makes the quality drop in the next episode all that more painful. Maybe the writers were worried that if they wrote more than one good episode a month, then people might actually think they know what they're doing and they'd be expected to actually do their jobs well. What, you expect me to keep talking about the good stuff? Where's the fun in that? Besides, we still have the other half of the title acronym to get through. The first part of which we catch up with is Blake, who's... She talks with the captain, who diagnoses her character a bit, and she decides to ditch her bow once and for all. And I should mention now that this is the only part of this episode that's actually important to Blake's overall character arc. But more on that later, because right now Yang is brooding about losing her arm at the end of Volume 3. Yang's dad comes in with a fancy robot arm for her as a gift from Ironwood in his quest to become the world's best bro. However, as Yang is still in max broodiness mode, she still hasn't yet ready to become the Yangter soldier. This scene is also pretty well written, and Yang's emotional emotional difficulty with dealing the loss of her arm feels very real and natural, unlike the size of their kitchen, because goddamn, how does anyone reach those cabinets? But enough praise, we have some meandering to get to with Blake. Her boat is attacked by a wild Gyarados, and despite being on a heavily armed vessel and completely outmatched, Blake takes it upon herself to attack the giant monster on her own, which of course goes poorly, but in the nick of time, who should be there but Son Goku? They flip around, earning style points, committing animation errors, and giving the middle finger to gravity. However, it would appear as though cannons are super effective against water types, and Gyarados is defeated, and nothing of importance was accomplished. Son and Blake banter to give more setup to an obvious will they won't they relationship that will probably end up feeling forced and inciting Bumblebee shippers.
It'll be a regular journey to the east.
And that terrible pun from Son tells the audience that he will continue to be around to be useless for the rest of the volume, for seemingly no reason other than to annoy me.
Meanwhile, at the Legion of Doom,
Salem and Cinder are doing something, but are interrupted by a jellyfish. And Cinder's question as to whether or not tales of Ozpin's demise were greatly exaggerated, and also something about a relic, but that's probably not important. But no time to figure that out, we have to get back to Farm Boy, who apparently is being haunted by Ozpit. But enough about that, back in the land of better-than-usual writing, Yang is still suffering from PTSD, and we find out that Tai is friends with Ooblik and Port. Why she wouldn't have known this before, assuming that these friendships have been going on for a while? Your guess is as good as mine. To summarize their conversation, Port is probably prejudiced against mice funness, and apparently Yang has reached the point of being able to make jokes about her missing arm.
This is normal now. It's just taking me a while to get used to it.
Or maybe not. This whole sequence is full of mixed signals on that front. However, as I have not lost an arm myself, nor do I know someone who has, I can't really speak for how often sadness sits in. Meanwhile, back at the plot, the posse are still walking, and it is revealed that they are being secretly followed by Crow. They decide to stop for the night at the AU Inn, which they have yet to do before and will never do again until the very end of the volume. Why they only sleep indoors this once for the whole journey, I don't know. Also, if they have the money for this hotel, why did they not just take a bus or something to Mistral? Keep that posted somewhere, because that will come up again later. Also, Crow is still creepily watching them from a distance, and we learn that he is in fact the stud we all assumed him to be. And hey, it's Yang's mom. Maybe we'll finally find out what they talked about at the end of Volume 2. No? Just the pronoun game? And that relic thing is actually going to be important? Wow, this all took such a massive dip in quality that you could probably make a sweet roller coaster out of it. So now it's an artifact plot in addition to a story about someone born to be the most special of protagonists. But just as we got some proper nouns going, Raven decides that making a spiteful retort and showing off her portal gun would be more fun than discussing how to best keep everyone alive. Also, in a world full of monsters, why is a woman walking through some weird portal the most ghastly thing this waitress girl has ever seen? Oh, and Yang decided now was the time to go full bionic commando, and the episode ends on another cliche because one cliche attracts more, like some kind of magnet of mediocrity. Back to the Blake plot, she and Sun arrive on the faunus-populated island of Menagerie, and Son illustrates his lack of understanding what the words crowded and cramped mean. Some stuff about social justice, which Son gets to show off how stupid he is because it's funny or something, I guess. Also, Blake's family are pretty well off. Speaking of which, we were introduced to her mom, Callie, and her father, Joseph Joestar. The show becomes Meet the Parents for a little bit as Blake catches up with her family and Son keeps being comic relief. And Callie asks the questions that I've been wondering this whole time.
Why is he here again?
Now, if only Son could follow her example of being plot relevant. Also, this face is the best thing in the whole episode, if not the entire volume. But hang on, something's actually happening, because the White Fang is here!
oh my god!
And they're dressed like the guys from Assassin's Creed. Blake tells her parents why the White Fang suck by summarizing the end of Volume 3. Connor and Ezio play dumb and leave all ominous-like, openly discussing their evil intentions.
I can hear you, you know.
It was Dante.
Returning once again to the plot, the squad is still walking, now complaining about it, making it even more baffling why they didn't just take a bus or something.
2 weeks?
Try 2 days, maybe a week. Seriously, guys, public transportation exists for a reason. That does beg the question, though, of how long it's been since they started their journey. Spoilers, this question will never be answered. The crew happened upon an abandoned town of demon lesbians, the backstory of which Ren knows for some reason, and what we learn about him later in the volume will only make us wonder further about why he knows this and what it has to do with his parents. Oh yeah, Weiss is in the show, and that's not the usual voice actor singing. Anyway, if you remember the setup for this, congratulations. It amounts to 30 seconds of a song that's not all that great. Also, side note, why would you buy the same dress in 2 different lengths? Wouldn't you rather just have 2 different outfits? But anyway, there's an after party where Mustache Snee is still being a dick and talking to other people who are also rich douchebags, like Discount Neptune, who has a name but I can't be bothered to remember it. Yeah, whatever, so Weiss flips out conjuring a pig and Iron Bro keeps it real. But anyway, there's still a main plotline happening, and hey, remember Chuckles? Well, now he's actually contributing to the plot by beating up our main characters and making this face. And when he actually tells them why he's there, RWBY, the astute person that she is, doesn't realize that fighting bad guys and letting them get away usually leads to more bad guys showing up. Oh, and there's this.
Well, you do interest me.
Why?
But anyway, this whole time Chuckles has really been Scorpion, or a Scorpion. Where he hid that tail is up to your imagination. Oh, also Crow's an Animorph. And most importantly, things are finally happening in this volume!
This man is overgasped.
Why would you follow that up with an exciting fight sequence when you can experience the pulse-pounding action of farm kid reading? Osmond continues to be a bad influence on children, even in death, by prompting farm kid to run away from home. And this happens.
So you just decided to read my thoughts?
Well, they're our thoughts now.
Yeah, who let that guy near children in the first place? Back to slightly more important things, Stasho is telling Weiss that it's not nice to murder people. The argument between the two is almost well written, if not for the fact that the guy we're supposed to see as being an asshole is simply punishing his child by confining her to a lavish mansion with full service and everything. But decided to lay out some corporal punishment tells us that there are no reasonable people in this family, especially when Weiss's argument is this.
People will ask questions.
No, they won't.
They'll want to know why the heiress to the Schnee Dust Company is suddenly nowhere to be found.
No, because the answer is she's at home, where she lives. You're bad at this. But yeah, her brother gets the company now, dad stashes some important Schnee, yada yada yada. None of this goes anywhere for the rest of the volume anyway, so who cares? I feel like I was talking about something more important earlier. Oh yeah, that fight between Crow and Scorpion. I'd almost forgot with all those other things in the way, destroying narrative continuity and all. This battle looks pretty good, and hey, Ruby almost got to be a sniper for once. Too bad she's a terrible shot. I don't know, maybe if her color was blue instead of red, she could snipe better. But don't worry, because Crow lays out a combo, and Scorpion can't get his counter input right. But when round 2 breaks out, Scorpion pulls back ahead. However, Ruby comes in to help Crow, making this one of those annoying battles from MK9 that's 2-on-1. Alas, Crow thinks smiling for the camera is way more important than focusing on his enemy, and gets hit by a back punch. But don't worry, everyone, Scorpion decides to smile for the camera too, giving Ruby the opportunity to cut off his tip. And he runs like a, what's the word? Bitch! Oh yeah, tried to sound adult and mature, but more coming off like jarring due to never having used words like that anywhere else in the series. I know it doesn't work for the joke, shut up! Oh, and Scorpion bleeds acid, apparently. Seems like something to look into, guys. No? Okay. It's not like scorpions are known to be poisonous and someone has a gaping wound from his tail or anything. Wait. But only time will tell as to whether or not this has taught Crow anything about taking turns at fight you have a clear advantage in being a bad idea. And before you comment it's because of his semblance causing people to have bad luck, it should technically affect friend and foe equally, so you'd still get that numbers advantage out of it. But I digress. Next episode, we actually stay with the main plot, and it's time to
gather around the campfire and sing our campfire song.
Or in this case, let Crow explain the plot to us instead of conveying it to us through some sort of visual medium. But wait, I may have spoke too soon because Crow's got a PowerPoint presentation for us, about religion no less. Now there are numerous issues with how they wrote this little side story, but I'll just stick with how lazy it is to just say, there's a light god who was good, and a dark god who was bad. I mean, if you look at other fictional worlds with their own mythology, there's usually a decent amount of effort put into planning and thinking names for whatever various belief systems the people of the world created have. A good example this would be the Elder Scrolls series, or Avatar. But why should we expect such a thing from the writers of this series when they don't even seem to have thought out the story they're telling right now? We get to learn a little bit more about our MacGuffin and that the Academy students were supposed to be protecting them. That information probably would have been useful for them to know. Don't let the bad guys get the thing in that place, or Armageddon. Going from Crow reads the Cimmerillium to Blake as she continues to wait around for something important to happen. And lo and behold, something is, as her Mom prompts her to go talk to Joseph. And holy shit, an actually decently well-written father-daughter moment out of this. So, good job, show. Of course, this gets almost immediately ruined by Son, who has somehow become such a superfluous character that he's now sucking away the important plot development of actual worthwhile characters. Awkwardly cut back to Team Junior, and Jean asks a question that almost makes it seem like the show has become self-aware.
Why doesn't the world know?
But Crow says telling people that someone wants to kill them all using some holy artifacts from actual gods they also didn't know existed, and not giving them any opportunity to prepare for such a potential disaster so they don't die would be a bad thing. Because, you know, thinking they're being attacked for seemingly no reason by a shadowy group and wishing they could have seen their loved ones just one last time is so much better for people's well-being. This sort of line of thinking makes much more sense when you realize this is Ozpin's idea, factoring, you know, everything he's done up to this point in the series. This actually becomes funny a few seconds later when we get this line.
So that when it comes time to place the blame, we can only point at each other.
That being a problem only caused by not telling people about the megalomaniac bent on world domination, because, as we know, a single figure to blame for everything never works as a way to unite people for a common cause. All this almost makes me wonder if Ozpin isn't actively trying to hinder his own side. Back to poor editing, I mean, Blake, she's just as pissed at Son as I was for interrupting her moment.
No concept.
Ha ha, so wonderful. Alas, before we can get the full force of Blake's cat scratch fever, a mysterious figure appears. But instead of throwing down, she just runs away with Blake and unfortunately Son giving chase.
I really don't like you.
though it appears nothing else interesting happens for the rest of that night with them, or it could just be the increasingly bad editing, because it's suddenly daytime and we're back with the main characters, and oh no, Crow is poisoned. Whoever could have foreseen this happening? No time for that though, because remember Yang? Well, she's having a fight with her dad. In the physical sense, followed by another pretty decent father-daughter moment where we get some exposition and character development delivered naturally through character interaction, almost like some kind of well-written story or something. But we can't keep that up for too long because Wheaties has to do some shit-talking, but more importantly, Weiss figures out how to summon one of the bosses from Dark Souls 2 and... oh wait, now we're back to Blake and Sohn, and it's night again. This leads to one of two conclusions. Either they've been chasing this mysterious person for almost 24 hours, or yet more bad editing. I'll leave it up to you to decide which one it is. When they catch up to their foe, Blake tries desperately to find some kind of plot. Sohn continues to be useless, but oh no, it would seem that it's infectious because Blake feels the need to do this.
Quit staring and grab it!
But apparently our baddie is someone who knows Blake from her past, and they hate Sun as much as I do. But unfortunately, my new favorite character doesn't stay long, disappearing menacingly. But she'll live on forever in my heart as the person who stabbed Sohn. And through an actually well-timed cut, we go back to the RWBY gang having to carry Crow because he's either being affected by the poison or he can't hold his liquor as well as he used to. The crew come to a fork in the road where after an argument, Red and Nora split off. For some reason. What happened to...
But we're helping Ruby with her objective.
Way to listen to your supposed leader there, Ren. Next episode begins with Farm Kid making the worst decision anyone in Remnant could ever make. Listening to Ozpin. So now he's running away because the little voice in his head told him to. That's a reasonable excuse, right? Oh, and wouldn't you know it, there are trains in this world that anyone could take, effectively making Ruby and the gang's decision to walk the whole way seem really, really stupid. I mean, unless you try to use a stolen credit card like Farm Kid does. But what luck, bad guy number 3 is there to pull a Fonzie and get him a free ticket. So Ruby and John arrive at the ruins of another destroyed town that Ren and Nora didn't want to go to, and the show decides it's fed up with all its plots not going anywhere and tells us Ren and Nora's secret origins. Spoilers, they lived in the destroyed town. And despite being the 5th plot of the volume, this one is actually pretty well written and is paced really well. Young Ren's happy life and innocent temperament getting established through a short but effectively written scene, and all of it thrown into turmoil by the Grim attack. Nora simply being shown as an orphan and living an already tough life, but gaining her first and at the time only friend during a time of tragedy. It all works really well, despite Hanzo's slow draw time and weird scream face, but those are just nitpicks in an otherwise well-made bit of backstory. However, all of this just brings into question what the town from before had anything to do with Ren and his past. We've actually got some decently written present stuff to deal with yet, as Ruby and John have a nice heart-to-heart about their journey so far, and the White Rose shippers join the Bumblebee shippers in sharpening their pitchforks. After the second half of the flashback that's still well-written, we see present Ren and Nora in the mountains far away from the road they said they'd be going on, and we get a stinger for the final fight. But the payoff for that isn't here yet, because there's still a whole other episode between those scenes for some reason, and...
Meanwhile, at the Legion of Doom...
Cinder's working on her firebending, and Salem shows that she's learned nothing from villain school by keeping the now crippled failure around. Then Yang gets some resolution to her arc for the volume, and we get some more decent dialogue between her and Todd. Next, it's Weiss's turn for resolution, and she's on a stealth mission, which, despite the poor decision to try sneaking in heels, she overhears a conversation between Mr. Mustache and Iron Bro setting up the plot thread for the next volume. And then Alfred helps her escape through a hidden door to, I guess, the stash cave or something, but no time to ponder that now, because the writers have taken it upon themselves to incite even more Bumblebee shippers through a scene between Sun and Blake that's actually pretty well written, somehow. Ugh, I feel dirty saying anything with Sohn in this volume is well written. But hey, now it's Cat, Milf, and Joseph's turn to interrupt moments because they've got a good reason to be here. They've also got plot to set up for the next volume. Back to the main characters, Ren and Nora somehow outran a giant monster for miles to make it there in time to be a part of the big action scene at the end. And we also got a good look at the big bad and...
What the hell are you supposed to be anyway?
Okay, I know it's based off a creature from mythology, but it's weird looking nonetheless. The entire fight with that, thing actually goes off pretty well, showing off the strength of the creature and the individual members of the team, as well as doing something else the show constantly forgets to do, despite being about a team of people, and it shows good teamwork. But the quality can't last forever, as help literally comes from the sky with flying boats from Mistral, which was right down the way, apparently, show up to save them. And at least one group of shippers won't come after the writers as we find out that hashtag Renora is hashtag confirmed. We get some nice closing scenes showing that everyone is alright and ready to actually do things in the next volume, notably Blake, who's going to take on the White Fang, and we see Yang covering as much ground as it took the entire volume for the RWBY gang to cover in just 2 brief scenes. Weiss's setup is her getting on some kind of plane, jet, whatever it is, to go presumably to Mistral, since that's where everyone else is going. And then we see Cinder thinking it makes her look cool to set a projection of Ruby on fire. I mean, like, seriously, why? I can accomplish just as much training as that right now by lighting a piece of paper on fire. Actually, no, that accomplishes more because there's something actually burning. I know that's a little rambly for such a really short scene, but a scene that really sucks nonetheless. But I digress. RWBY is writing a letter that makes her adventure sound better than it actually was, the guy in charge of Haven Academy is probably evil, Crow's alive and still drinking heavily, and Farm Kid makes it to Mr. on that train, which again makes me wonder why RWBY and friends decided it would be a good idea to walk there. God damn. Speaking of, their story is definitely one of the biggest time wasters of the entire volume. It would be the biggest if not for the fact that they actually put some story in here and there, however little that might be. The important parts being the fight with the Scorpion, the backstory for Ren and Nora, and the final fight don't come until halfway through and the end respectively. While there are some nice character moments in the interim, all of it is hampered by the fact that we keep cutting back to them for seemingly no other reason than to remind the audience that they're still around. These segments made even worse knowing the fact that they didn't even have to walk there. Weiss's story actually manages to work pretty well. Despite some questionable moments, we see how her time at Beacon has changed her and that she no longer feels like a part of the rich asshole society of Atlas, the biggest problem with it being its pacing due to being scattered haphazardly throughout the volume, but I'll get back to that in a moment. Blake's story is definitely the worst out of the four, as very little happens in it, and the first episode she's in, or at least the events including her, could be cut entirely, this being a fact that even without factoring in Son's complete and utter pointlessness and his presence throughout her story, just hinders it and brings it down a lot. He was completely unnecessary, and I still have no idea why they opted to include him. Yang's story, despite being the shortest, is by far the best. Watching her deal with the loss of her arm and adapting to her no robotic one is all pretty well written, and at least for when the scenes are playing out, all pretty well paced. Of course, with her leaving at the end, I kind of wonder if Ty's semblance isn't something that makes people just want to get away from him. Predicting it now, first episode of Volume 5, we see the dog leave. Of course, the biggest issue with Yang's story is how long it takes for her story to show back up in the volume. All of this sort of traces back to how poorly these stories were edited together. It seems more like all of these stories were written independently of one another, and that the scenes were just sort of shuffled together with filler given to the RWBY gang to pad out the volume. Perhaps the biggest issue with the editing and frankly the writing in general in this volume is that it's completely unclear when any of these events are happening relative to one another, or let alone relative to the end of Volume 3. This is a big issue simply because not only is it important to know when things are happening, as it's one of the fundamental questions along with, who, what, where, why, certain things that also have yet to be answered in this series, but it also can destroy the entire narrative coming to Volume 5, as when everyone arrives at Mistral separately, we need to know how long it took them to get there and how long they were working on their journeys. As to reiterate, when is one of the most important questions to ask and answer when you're retelling any sort of event, fictional or otherwise. Of course, what could be expected from the people who've had a hard enough time telling us one decent story, let alone 4? Ultimately, the way this volume turned out is making me think that the jump in quality of storytelling for Volume 3 was more of a fluke than anything else. Of course, if Volume 5 turns out to be really good, then I'm just going to hate this volume even more, because that just means that they could have put more effort into writing this, but chose not to. Instead, making a setup volume for things to come, which hopefully aren't as bad as what this was. Well, that's all I can bother to say about that. Come back next time when I talk about something.